just having a quick catch up that actually turned out to probably a long catch up actually.
Yeah.
Just covering a couple of topics, and wanted to hit record before because we're getting stuck into some real key items, and I thought, look, let's get this on record where people can share it, listen to it. I, and I'm sure many others, read a lot of what you put out there, follow your content. There's lots of people are part of your community on Bravado. And there are a couple of things that stand out, like for me, as a consumer of what you put out there. One of them is, your thoughts on culture, specifically related to like sales culture.
Yeah.
I think that's right now we're in kind of a critical time where maybe that's being tested.
Yeah. Stress tested for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts. Maybe we'll start there, of right now in the environment that we're at, with all the pressures that we're at, where do you see, sales leaders stepping up? Where do you see sales leaders, I guess we can talk about where they're falling down as well. How do we navigate this when we look at like building the right sales culture, which is already an issue in itself in general, right?
Yes.
How do we structure companies today in an ideal world, or in this maybe new world, right?
Right.
Post-COVID world.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a timely question, right? Because things got stress tested. I mean, everybody's culture is great when things are going well. It's when things are going bad, that's when you really see the test of character and what people are really made of. And I mean, like, look at it like this. The majority of sales today is driven by outcomes, right? You walk into any sales floor, right? If we walked into 100 different sales floors, the significant vast majority of them would have monitors up all over the walls showing outcomes, outputs, how much revenue was produced, how many meetings were set, how many of this, how many of that, okay? Yet we know intrinsically we're not motivated by outcomes, but the journey, right? It's not about the destination, it's the journey. What do you do to get that outcome? Do you do the right things or do you do the wrong things to get there? And if you are building a sales culture on winning, well, guess what? It's really hard to win for a lot of companies right now. So your culture kind of just broke down. But if your culture was based on the things that true culture is made, like real world culture, like shared principles and values, courage, integrity, honesty, character, doing things the right way, celebrating people going above and beyond themselves to help others, working for the greater good, then your sales culture would be fine in this moment. You'd fall back to what you know matters most. And you would remind each other, as a social group does and peer pressures each other, to adhere to those principles of integrity, value, honesty, courage, in a time when you need it most. And your messaging would show that, and your customers would know that because you were already built upon that. So that's what you're seeing, right? And so the sales leaders that are doing it right, they are right now thinking about their business, their customers, their behavioral changes, and adapting to it. Like a great case in point, Kevin Dorsey shared on the State of Sales virtual summit that was a couple weeks ago done by Aircall, how Patient Pop pivoted. They said, we sell to doctors who need to get their patients to come visit them. Well, guess what? Patients aren't visiting doctors right now. So what do they pivot to? They pivoted to telehealth, because a lot of these doctors are not set up in the US to do telehealth. That was never an issue for them, but people still got to see their doctor because they're in tune, because their sales culture was never based on winning there. Their sales culture is about doing the right thing. So when this happened, they said, okay, well, we're still going to do the right thing for ourselves and for our customers. And they were immediately able to see a better opportunity. Now, they had to lay off some people because the telehealth opportunity is not the same as what they were doing before. But they did it in a really caring, kind, sincere manner. And that manner in which they approached it honored the integrity and company values that they had said that they had in the good times, right? So they proved that they have that integrity, that they have that sales culture that's going to last any adversity that they face. So that's the example we all need to follow right now. Like those are the footsteps that we should be walking.
Yeah. I think that, like you touched on a few key things. Like one is what drives your sales culture, right? Ultimately, what drives the culture? you would assume that most companies' sales function is driven by who they're selling to, right? Like I created this sales function to sell to this specific customer, right?
Yep.
So like, the example that you gave is a great one, right? Pivoting. Why? Because no one's going to those, seeing doctors face to face. Where's our customer? Where's our end user? Where's the person supposed to be benefiting from the technology going to be? Right. I had a similar kind of, I had a guy actually I put it out on LinkedIn anonymously, but someone said to me, hey, I'm selling office supplies and I'm like way behind my target. And my CEO is like, you gotta hit your target. And David, I'm asking for advice here. Like, what would I do differently?
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna force people to go into offices? Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna pitch like COVID-19 infection versus like a new sheet of printing paper? Like, so I said to him, do you have like a home delivery service or something like that? Have you thought of like a work from home spin on this? Like, we're gonna create a care pack for all of your employees who are at home right now, who've been forced to sit down. Some of them don't have a printer, and some of them don't have paper, and some of them don't have pens. We're going to send like whatever. He's like, no, our executive team are very old school. They're just more like hit the phones. Where's the culture? Like, that's not even. Yeah. There's a culture, like how you take care of your people. Then there's also like the strategic element, which is what you're touching on, right? And like, do you think as a sales manager that maybe if I hit the donkey harder, it will just run faster? Like, there is a maximum speed limit to this donkey.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Perfect analogy. Perfect analogy.
Up at some point, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, you're not doing anymore right now.
Yes.
And right now we're all like, we're all kind of riding the donkey. With the exception of some companies that have really got a huge kick out of this period.
Right.
Or pivoted, as you said.
But even they pivoted, right? Like Zoom. Yeah. We all think of Zoom. Yeah. But what did Zoom do in this moment? They opened up access to free and they started catering to verticals that they normally didn't care about. All of a sudden, education became a huge vertical for them. Yeah. And they were like, we'll give you everything for free. Right. So even they pivoted in some of their this boon that they're having. So, and again, because they're ranked like one of the top places to work, or like the top place to work by LinkedIn. Right. So they had that culture before. They were not an outcomes driven culture. They were a values driven culture. So when push came to shove, even in this time of explosion, they were able to react. And that's why you saw the response to their security issues. They didn't wither. Their CEO gave an open apology, conceding to the fact that they failed. Yeah. CEOs don't do that, right? Yeah. I mean, I still remember when they just don't do that. Like, we can go back to many examples where CEOs don't own up to that. He just penned a letter and said, "You're right. I'm sorry. And we're going to fix this." So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, the strategy is always going to follow the culture, the mindset, the principles of the people behind it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was just thinking as you described that, I saw a video from Richard Branson. Virgin Atlantic in Australia had a close, or Virgin Australia, I think, had a kind of shut down. He was basically putting out this video talking about it. And he was saying, look, I'm working night and day to do whatever I can to kind of pivot this company, whatever. And it takes guts, it takes guts. And today, I guess we're seeing a couple of things. We're seeing companies under a lot of strain financially. We're seeing some scenarios where maybe their product doesn't even, offer value, right, anymore or whatever because of the change. Yes. And we're also seeing, leaders having to let people go. And I know we were touching on it a bit earlier, but like, there is this, and maybe it's just the mindset I have, but I feel like there is this change coming up just in terms of the way people think about loyalty, the way people think about a company, the definition of a company, right? And what's to come. My theory, and I want to kind of get your take on it, is that this period is going to see the rise of small bands or tribes of professionals who basically have complementary skills and approach either businesses or what have you, governments, who knows, with a sort of like package. Hey, we're going to develop your sales plan for you. We're going to solve this problem for you. I have 20 years experience in this area. I'm pulling in this person. And they create this kind of loose band, charges, I guess, a certain kind of fee, and they take care of themselves. And it's like this kind of blended entrepreneur, solo, maybe it's just the world that I'm in, right? But I feel like when you talk about loyalty as a company, you forget that it goes kind of both ways. And
Yes.
a company will always let go of people if they're underperforming.
Yes.
Okay. It does, it's just a matter of time. They might have a few
Mm.
meetings with you in HR, and they might hear you out, oh, I know you're going through a divorce, or, whatever. Okay, yeah, I hear it. It's, you've been sick for the last month, but here's the thing: we really need those numbers up. You need to find
Exactly.
it within yourself. There's only so far they'll go. In the end, a lot of it's outcomes based. So I
Yes.
wonder what you think. Like, when we look at, like, let's assume the world changes a little bit, right? I don't think it's going to change drastically. There's just people, but some of the things I've seen. For example, we're both talking to each other from our houses. Okay,
Yes.
I'm happy. Like, my kids are going to start crying at some point in the background. Okay, that's first things,
Yeah.
but you're going to hear them, and it's
Yeah.
just made things much more human. Like,
Yes.
on sales call, I've been on sales calls with people now. Like, I had a call where my kid was roaring like a dinosaur because he's obsessed with it, right? And I'm like, I'm really sorry, he loves dinosaurs.
That's
And then
awesome.
he brings his son on. He's like, hey, like, my son also loves dinosaurs. He had like a 6-year-old, and his son's like, wow, on
Nice.
the screen. I was just like, wow, like, I've been missing out on this my whole sales career. Like, I
Right.
didn't know I was dealing with humans,
Right.
like,
Right.
hey, you're
Right.
actually a real person.
Right.
Um, so, like,
You
in
have
the
thoughts and feelings too, like
yeah,
me.
hey, you actually feel things. Like, you're not just someone I need to convince to buy something so I can,
Right.
take care of my family. Um,
Right.
so, like, where do you see this headed? Do you think it's going to change? How do you see it changing? What are your thoughts on, an idea like this? Do you think it's the way things are going to go?
It's a wonderful thought. I love that you bring it up. I love the way your mind works, David, because actually it's a wonderful thought. And you're right. Like, let's go to the heart of it, loyalty, right? Like, what you described wouldn't happen if we had loyalty to the companies we worked for, right? Like, if I could go back in time and be that IBM seller for 20 years and never get fired regardless of what I did, and just always, they'd always benefit from my tribal knowledge, they'd always benefit from my expertise, and then I would just be secure in my job. Fast forward to today, I haven't worked at a company longer than 3 years. It's just how it is, and I'm in startups, so maybe it's a little bit different, but I don't think it's too dramatically different than what I see out there. It just, nowadays, you don't typically stay at a company too long, and the stats back that up, right? The stats back that up for sales leaders and their tenure companies, and what it is for account executives. So that loyalty is gone because companies are the ones that have to initiate it, not us, right? Like, I don't take a job with the intention of staying there 3 months. I don't think anybody does. Right? You go through all that effort and emotional taxation to get a job. You're not there just to be like, yeah, I'm going to bounce in half a second, right? We're not hourly employees where we're going to just, skip and jump at the drop of a dime. We're there for the long haul, but our companies aren't. Like you said, if you're having issues, cool, just replace you, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this situation gave some companies cover to do some things that they probably should have been doing before, right? Like, they shouldn't have grown as big as they did, or their cash flow couldn't really sustain the business that they had, and so on and so forth. So now they have to correct, and they're going to use this as the excuse when really it was just bad management. And they're laying off people. So if you're in that scenario, like so many of us are, absolutely, right? The gig economy applied to a more um, a more, let's say, contractual or project based approach makes all the sense in the world, right? If you know a marketer from your previous company that also got laid off, and the two of you are pretty good and you had a good relationship and you can provide value for businesses in a similar space, why wouldn't you? If you can go consult the competitors of the company that you got laid off from and give them some advice because you didn't sign a non-compete or anything like that, why wouldn't you? If you could, um, you know, coordinate with the skill set that you have in outbound sales with somebody that has really strong demand generation skills, and go create a package or a guide to help companies who are launching those two functions for the first time, why wouldn't you? Yeah, so you could totally create these, like you said, these little tribes and pockets that are going to be very value add, and get into this sort of gig economy mode, but on a more project base at a higher price point, and not have to go back to the traditional workforce potentially. Now, it's not going to work for everyone, because if you didn't have enough
Right.
experience, or you didn't have the brand, or you didn't have the network to do so, now is the time to build that. like, it's not hard. This idea of like a network, I thought of it too, of like this ambiguous buzzword thing of like, what does that mean? All it's saying is people you know.
Right.
How many people know you? How many people do you know? And the easiest way to do that is to just engage with people on LinkedIn. And what we did, right? We connected over just 15 minutes initially. And
Yeah.
now here we are having this discussion, and we've become friends over that time. And all it took was me doing a couple posts, you doing a couple posts, sharing a couple laughs, and me like, why don't we just talk?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's network. That's all it is. And you just do it at scale with something like LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever platform you want to use. It just happens to be that LinkedIn is underutilized right now and is a really easy one to tap into.
Now, I mean, that's, I think a critical piece here because, I follow a lot of what you put out. I put out a lot of content as well myself. And I've seen, like, for example, in my career, even over the last, let's say 2 years or 18 months that I've started to kind of really invest in putting out stuff, it's made a huge difference for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people look at that and would want to benefit from it. I know for you, like I've seen you just like explode right over social, and I'd love to hear like from your side. Let's say I'm an AE today. Okay, I've got some experience. I've got my opinions on things. I'm scared. Maybe maybe I'm not the smartest sales. Like I'm not, right? That's what I tell people. Like when I talk to them, right? Like I'm not.
Yep.
I don't know all the things. I'm just giving my opinion. But let's say
Yep.
I'm in that world, right? Maybe I've been let go, or maybe I'm unhappy, whatever, and I'm trying to build this brand because let's say I'm realizing, hey, maybe the company isn't always going to take care of me because even though this quarter and last quarter I was top performer, the quarter coming up, I'm not doing so great. And they're starting to knock on my door. And me personally, I've had that situation, right? I was a consistent top, like number one or number two, no exceptions. I had one bad quarter in my sales career and I had the CEO and the CFO knock on my door. And I was
Amazing.
like, guys, what are you talking about? Like,
I know.
Like, I'm like, this can happen. And mentally, it messed me around, right? It really threw me off. So what do you do? Let's say you're in that position today. How do you start building a brand? How do you start investing in yourself? What are some of the key building blocks here?
Yeah. Well, it's an awesome question because, and I think I shared a post even just yesterday about how even now, when I post, I still get a little voice in my head that says, this is stupid. It's shit. No one's going to read it.
Yeah.
I have to overcome that voice on a daily basis. And I've been posting for like 10 months. You think at some point I would just not hear that voice, but almost daily I still hear that voice. So that's what we all face. And I think we do that, right? We compare ourselves upwardly on that. We're like, okay, there are people way more experienced than me. Why should I be posting, and so on and so forth? And it's natural to think that. And it's not necessarily wrong to think that. That's okay. But here's the thing. Your experience matters. Like there are people going through the same, like we're always recreating the wheel individually, right? Like there are people who are in your shoes right now that could benefit from hearing your story because they will hear themselves in your story and you will form a connection because of that. There's value just in that. You don't have to be brilliant. You don't have to be Einstein and redefine the industry with a thought. It could be just the basic fundamentals of reminding somebody of something that matters and just sharing your own story. And that is sufficient in and of itself. And the nice thing is you're graded on a curve, right? We're not graded on how good our content is. We're graded on how good our content is compared to everything else that's out there. And right now, there's not that much out there.
Right.
I go through my feed right now and it's all, here's my work from home desk. Remember that time that we went to some conference and some screenshot of somebody's Zoom meeting from their team, right? There's not a lot of like variety out there.
Yeah.
And then, some odd person posting about empathy, which is like great, but nobody's explaining how. And if you were just an AE that got laid off, you know exactly what it's like to sit there and told something and not explain how to do it, right? It was like work harder and have a great attitude. How? Where are those areas that I should do it? And now you've got a chance to contemplate that. And that is your content. It's like, I remember when I had to make fake dials to please my boss because they were on me about my attitude. And it didn't make sense because I thought I was performing okay. Here's how I would have changed that scenario. If I could have switched roles, this is the conversation I would have had with myself. That's your post, right? That's your post day in and day out. Post those things and people care. I would care to read that because that resonates with me. That's that again, I will hear my own story and yours, and that will form a connection with me. And anybody who comments or likes it, send them a message saying thank you and connect with them for 15 minutes on Zoom. And guess what? Rinse and repeat for a couple months and you now have a network.
Yeah.
You now have a network. That's it. That's how to turn that weird, crazy word that doesn't really mean anything into an actual thing that you have.
I think you're like, spot on. And one of the things kind of tying into what you were showing about, like, the outcome versus the journey, right? It's kind of it's the same process here, really. People always assume that everyone wants to see the end of the movie, right? Here's the beginning, here's the end, but the part that keeps people hooked, like in Rocky, is the journey, right? It's like him training. We want to see him training. We don't really, we know he's probably going to win that fight or whatever, but we like to see the struggle, and he's
absolutely.
And that's like the world that everyone relates to, because we're all real humans, right?
Yes.
And I think also on a company level, I think, the other way around, if you're a business owner today, I think we should spin it, if we want to put ourselves in the other shoes. I'm a business owner. I'm bringing people on, to work with me. The way I kind of see it is basically that, and I've had this conversation recently with people that I'm bringing on to work with me. I said, look, I don't expect anyone to have a tattoo of the company. Okay. I'm not going to either, just by the way, because, just FYI, it's my company, but this is just a machine for us. Like, this is a machine for us humans to take care of ourselves and those that we care about. And the more that we contribute to this machine, the more we win together.
Yes.
And so if one of us lets it down, the machine breaks and we all get hurt.
Right.
That's it. That's it. And I think part of the problem is, and maybe it's just the world I'm in, or maybe this is something everyone feels, but leading into this period, leading to any period where there've been like massive, let-offs and what have you, right? Firings, whatever you want to call them. You had this impression that, well, I represent this company. What's your definition? Oh, I'm a salesperson at company A, ABC, and that's what you're at. That's who I am, and I'm measured on hitting my numbers, and I'm a good salesperson, which makes me a good person because I'm hitting. But if there is a reset after this, of some sort, maybe from a company perspective, it's also the realization that, like, this is just a tool. It's just a money-making machine, ultimately, that takes care of its stakeholders, whoever they may be, whether they're the employees and the investors, what have you. And maybe if people understand that's the whole point of a company, then they'll take care of each other, right? So, you talk about empathy. I wanted to hear your take on this whole, one last kind of a piece here. If we look at the way people are selling today versus how they were selling before, there's lots of discussions about it. And when you're talking to buyers, sell with empathy, I don't want to kind of, be fluffy. I want to talk about, like, realistically, right?
Yes.
What would you do differently?
Yes.
Is there anything you do differently? What does that mean today? I have to get on the phones right now. I'm selling my solution today.
Yes.
Am I doing anything differently?
Yes, you 100% are. And it's not, how are you holding up? That's not empathy. Like, there's no way that's real empathy, is just asking somebody, how are you holding up, and then going into your sales pitch. You haven't done anything. Like, that's not real empathy. Real empathy is like, I will sit down and think about the person who I'm about to call, and I will think about their customers, how they make money. And I will analyze that situation, and I will walk in and I will be intelligent about that piece, right? Like, I've been trying to give all these different, like, here's the thing. I don't know what the right answer is, because there's probably multiple answers for different industries and different scenarios, but I do know what the wrong answer is. So I don't think anyone has the right answer per se, but I do know there is a wrong answer in this question. The wrong answer is, I'm going to do what I did 3 months ago. That's not going to work. Whatever you were doing before is not going to work. Okay. Even, again, go back to Zoom. Even Zoom is doing things differently, and they're the ones, quote unquote, winning through all this, right? That are seeing success in all this. And even they had to change. Right? So whatever it was before, global pandemic hit, world has now changed. Don't do what you did before. Here are the ways that you could try to do something different. If if you're selling to an industry that has suffered greatly, okay, then the number one thing you could be doing right now is telling them, how can I help you survive? Right? Like that's what Toast is doing, who is selling to restaurants, right? They sell a point of sale solution for restaurants. They right now are the biggest champions of keeping small restaurants open. They are the ones that are out there lobbying the government to fund the payrolls of these small businesses, right? And those restaurants will remember. They'll remember that they had an ally and a vendor that cared about their well-being deeply and fundamentally and put themselves out there for it. Okay, if you're in a one that's not as devastated as that, right? It's kind of in the middle. Then start thinking about how you can give them some actual value. And I'm not saying like the word value like this, I'm like real value. Like for example, one of the startups I work for, we sell to wealth advisors. Wealth advisors right now, some of them are doing really well. Some of them are losing a lot of clients. And we just went to the ones that are doing really well. And we said, can you explain to us the 3 things you did to earn the business of the last client you just signed in this pandemic? And they walked us through exactly what they did. Can you show us the email that you sent them? Can you show us the deck that you showed them? Can you give us the proposal that you used to win their business over? And we just put that all together in a guide. And we sent it out to advisors and said, we surveyed 20 something advisors that were able to grow their book of business over the last month. Here's what they did, right? Tactical, real advice. There was no, how are you feeling? How are you holding up? Didn't even mention COVID-19, just went straight into, we probably were going to take an assumption right now and assume that you are suffering because of what happened. So if that's the general assumption, here's how to remedy that for your business. No strings attached, no sign up required to do it, ungated, freely given, right? So there are these things that you could be doing right now. That's how you got to think. You got to really dig deep with the creativity and find those things that you think somebody on the other end wants to hear. A third one, I'll give you a third option. If I was an SDR right now, I would think to myself, how much research can I compile about consumer sentiment, right? Because every single week it's changing. The stock market goes up a little bit, then all of a sudden it goes down. The whole issue with the oil wars going on right through this pandemic. Weird things are affecting the economy and from many, many angles. Is there any way that I can synthesize all of that data into a single one pager and send that as an update to my buyers and just be like, look, the world sucks right now. It's kind of confusing. There's actually a ton of misinformation. I've done my best to source and cite 6 different things that should give you a trend week over week, what's happening in consumer sentiment in your industry. I guarantee you, if they're in buy mode, they're going to pick up the phone and call you back about that. And if they're not in buy mode, at the very least, when all of this is over, you'll have a really easy conversation to have with them because they will remember that you were that person that gave them that report that made a little bit easier to understand what was going on in their world. Right? So these are the tactical things you could do today to actually provide empathy. None of it involves how are you holding up, how are you doing?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's exactly it. And I think, again, it comes down to who you serve, right? And maybe what you serve as well, right? And I think that part of what gets lost here is the humanity, the connection, right? The ability to understand that in the end, when you're in sales, when you're in marketing, maybe you're connecting on different levels, but ultimately it's all about human to human connection. People, it's the classic, people buy from people. And I think that, it doesn't take a pandemic or shouldn't take a pandemic for like sales professionals to realize that, right? That ultimately, if I can put myself in someone else's shoes, they're going to want to at least relate to talk to me, right? That's the bottom line, and it's the same way, almost like you build friendships. It's the same kind of thing. It's relating, it's sharing information, it's benefiting each other. In this case, there's a commercial end to it, right? It's for commercial gain, but if you, by the way, and if your clients are your friends, you want to talk about personal branding and building your own. I mean, are you kidding me? You go into the next company. One of the things I think most AEs, specifically in the SaaS, space, don't do well enough is their Rolodeck, their book of business.
I'm guilty of that.
I am too,
I'm guilty of that.
And it's like something that if I'm, if I'm a salesperson today and I'm being laid off, it doesn't mean copying the CRM, right? And downloading the CRM, that's illegal, but it does mean going through all those customers that you do have a good connection with and saying,
yes,
hey, let me just keep like, do I have that person on LinkedIn? Do I have that person's contact information? And when you do move to a different, different outfit, whatever, and you've got something complimentary, they remember you. Hey,
Yes.
Bilal, yeah, like
Yes.
you were great. Like, you're a good friend. We just keep in touch. You got something new? Yeah, I'm interested, or I can introduce you to my network.
Yes.
This is how you build. This is like the compound interest effect of all your sales work.
Yes.
You're
Great
talking about
analogy.
resetting, before this, you're talking about the resetting to zero. Maybe you want to share a little bit more about that, but you know, we shouldn't reset to zero every time we move companies. If it's completely different industry, fine, but you should still, you've got that asset. The asset is all these conversations, all these relationships you built. That's hugely powerful. That's hugely powerful. I'll give you a very basic one. I'm advising a company, and how I got in was basically I introduced them to a huge, like, top 5 household name in the US,
Nice.
like one of the
Okay.
biggest companies. It starts with an A. So so one of the A's, okay.
Okay.
Um, and how I know that company is through someone who I've, like, kind of worked with in a different company. But
Yeah.
basically, they're at a point now where we haven't signed anything, right? But they're at a point now they're about to sign, like, a massive, what's going to
Nice.
be probably a 7-figure deal. Okay, I haven't
Nice.
asked for a set. Now, obviously, they've been in touch. They want me to work with them. They want me to advise them. I set that up, no strings attached, right? I
Mm-hmm.
set that up, no strings attached. Now,
Mm-hmm.
do I kick myself sometimes and wish I had taken an introduction?
A little bit. A
Maybe,
little bit. A
But
little
what
bit.
I'm saying is, probably. But what I'm saying is, like that's your game right now. I think part of it is what kind of you talking about, like, thinking creatively, and using some creativity in terms of engaging with people. Like,
Yes.
all of us, if you've been having sales conversations every day, you're sitting on a absolute fortune of assets, and those are the human relationships that you're building. So
Yes.
I think that that's like, something just to kind of tie this up. Something that I notice very, very common thread in everything you post is all about that interpersonal relationship aspect to it, right? That higher cause. Um, you talk a lot about culture. You talk a lot about the way you present yourself, but there's a very, very personal aspect to it. I think you're also very real and raw about your experience. You're not afraid to talk about, like, hey, here's what's gone really badly in my career, and here's how I would
Yeah.
fix it, right? A lot of people,
Yeah.
myself included, are already scared to do that, right? I want to put out this shiny image. And if I do show something negative, it's like, like in high school, the girls be like, oh, I'm so fat. And other girls like, no, you're not. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, really? Yeah, you're skinny.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like these, no, like, it's okay to just say, like, hey guys, I made a huge mistake. And by the way, here's how I think you should fix it. But I don't know. It's
Yeah.
okay. We are living in an interesting time. I know it's hard
We
for a lot
are.
of people. Maybe it's too hard to reflect on it now. I'm in a position where I can start reflecting on some of it. I wasn't in that position a month
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
A month ago, I was freaking out. You got a
Yeah.
family, you got people to take care of, and a lot of people maybe are still in that place.
Yeah.
I think that's something that, as you see this thing cross the world, you kind of see these countries go into waves, right? Where the
Yes.
US wasn't so much affected a few months ago, and life was normal. Here in Israel, life wasn't so normal, right?
Right.
And so, I think you're bang on. I think that that's maybe, something that we should always think about, actually, when we sell anything, right? Is
Yes.
like, who's on the other line? How am I adding value to
Yes.
them? Maybe before I'm even asking them to give me something back in return.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
And
people
just
buy from
play
people,
the long
right?
game.
So
Yeah.
people buy from people, and like, I love the analogy of the compounding interest, because that's essentially what it amounts to, especially if you do it over a long period of time. Like, I look back at 10 years of sales, and how many relationships I let slip, and how little I stayed in touch with my customers. And I had just even done 1% of that, right now I'd be like made. Like, I could, it would have been incredible if I had just done that. So opportunities wasted, but it's never too late. And like right now, you're right. Like right now is the time. And I totally can also understand that, some people out there don't have the financial capacity to weather the storm, to deal with a furlough, to deal with that. So there's all these personal elements going on, and those of us that can should be extremely grateful that we can, and that we're in a position to allow us to, and then capitalize on that privilege and take advantage of that privilege right now. Because There are people out there who they can't do it. And, you know, the easiest thing that people can do right now is to remember that in times of crisis, your character will be tested and people will remember the side you show them today. Right. People will remember those that, you know, it's like in any major incident, there are some people who duck for cover. There are some people who look towards the danger. There are some people who will grab onto others to survive themselves. There'll be others helping pull people out and aiding them. Right. We all have different fight or flight reactions. And the best thing you can do right now is to make yours the fight reaction, make yours the proactive reaction, make yours the positive reaction, because people will remember that and that will pay dividends for you. So whether that's really writing something that's tactically empathetic to your buyer, or finding a way to provide some value inside your company outside of your normal role that you think can turn into something great and will be appreciated and respected by your company for doing so, or whether that's, if you're in a situation where you got laid off, building your network right now, like this very moment, so that way you can get into that gig economy, that freelance project-based economy, and still be able to sustain yourself without getting a traditional job for as long as this plays out, because nobody really knows when this is going to end. And what if this keeps going for a while, right? So if you've got some knowledge and you've learned some things and you've got some stories, which we all have, now is the time just to take some action on it. And that good character and that sincerity and action gets you way further than you'd ever imagine. But it's just not going to manifest unless you do something about it right now. So that's like to your point, it's going to be compounding interest, and it's going to lead to really good things. And the status quo, we all know, is not going to work for a lot of situations people are in right now. Like again, there's not a lot of right answers per se. There might be, or excuse me, there's not a clear one right answer. There might be a lot of different ways to take it, but the wrong answer is to assume that whatever was going on 3 months ago is going to be the answer. It's not. Times have changed. So that's not going to work anymore.
I think, that it's like such a great message to kind of end our recorded conversation on. I hope that we've kind of shared some things of value here. I certainly got a lot out of this, and I think that this is such a, that's awesome. I think it's like such a great message in general to share. It's a timely message to share now. I think there's a lot of people in our profession, which is a profession based on, or maybe wrongly evaluated on, the outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. That right now going through a pretty tough journey, as you shared. And I think that, this is a real opportunity for a lot of people to maybe reassess how they're doing things, and both maybe professionally, both personally. I want to, I would assume, I'm going to make a pledge on your behalf. I would assume that if anyone reaches out to you, looking for some sort of advice, guidance, what have you, I'm assuming you're open to that.
100%.
100%. Okay, cool.
Yes.
I am too. Belal, what's the best way for people to get hold of you if they do want to chat, do you want to pick your brain, hear your thoughts?
So, right, if you join the Bravado community, which is free, you can direct message me right there. So that's the easiest way, because my LinkedIn messages suck because of the LinkedIn UI. That's we could do another whole hour on just that. Yeah. It's super frustrating to try to see messages. So that's not the good route. So it's the Bravado community is the easiest way. I'm there, like I'm in there every single day. So that's the place, and you'll find like-minded people. I mean, I don't want to be the face of anything. I'm not trying to be the poster boy of anything here. It's got to be a community, because real things change when we do things together. It's not an individual effort. There's no way this is going to all work out because one person did one thing. It's not how it's going to play out. So if you want to see other like-minded people that get this sort of stuff, that's the place.